can contacting our loved ones heal us on this side? And when we lose loved ones, how do we heal? How do we move on? How does their soul become free, happy, but we're left in grief and sorrow? But one day our time will come, and when we do leave this plane, what actually leaves us? Is it soul, energy? Well, I'm ready to find out, and I hope you are too. Today we have world-renowned psychic medium and attorney Mark Anthony talking about his latest book, The Afterlife Frequency, the scientific proof of spiritual contact and how the awareness will change your life forever. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the manyth time, the one and only Mark Anthony.
Tony, thank you for having me back. It's always an honor. I just love working with you. It's not an interview. It's like two friends sitting around having a cup of coffee,
Right?
just going at it.
And that's the way I feel about you too, because like I said, manyth times, because a lot of times, I get people on for one time and it's great, and then I don't see them for another couple of years. But you're one of my favorite guests, and it's great because you always have such information that about pretty much any topic we throw on the table, and you come at it with your wisdom and your research and just your intuition. So not many people can do that. So thank you for being here as always. As everybody in the chat room, thank you guys for joining us. And I know you're my favorite co-host in the world. So please, about 20, 25 minutes in, get your questions ready for Mark as we go through this little journey together about his latest book, The Afterlife Frequency. So first of all, Mark, tell us about this book.
Well, this is the most ambitious project I've probably ever engaged in. I mean, all of my books are my children,
right?
If
Right.
But this one I've been working on in my entire life because it took me 6 years to write it and years to do the research and to compile the stories to illustrate it. And what happened here, Tony, is that when I was 8 years old, my dad was my absolute hero.
Right.
I mean, he was not just my dad, but he was also a NASA engineer, and
Wow.
He'd been a Navy SEAL. And because my dad worked with astronauts, I thought,
I mean,
oh
come
my God,
on.
he was so cool. Yeah, he was like way cool. And and he said, he goes, you were a difficult child because you never stopped asking questions. Everything was why, how. And I remember one night we were looking at the stars, and he explained to me, he said, Mark, nothing is impossible. And there's no such thing as a mystery. There's only questions for which we do not yet have the answer.
Right.
And if enough research, enough funding, and enough focus and dedication is put into any question, you'll find the answer, and there'll be a scientific explanation. And so that got me going, that got me
right.
thinking. And so throughout my life, growing up as a medium, having parents with mediumistic abilities, it runs in the family for generations. I wanted to explain to people how this happens, why this happens, where this happens. But then, Tony, I saw something, that the different forms of what I call interdimensional communication, in other words, contact with spirits.
Right.
There's different types. There's not just contact, through a medium like me. There's when people get a visitation. Maybe they get a sense that a loved one is nearby, or
right.
they have a dream where a deceased loved one comes and talks to them, or they have a near-death experience, or a deathbed vision where somebody that you love is terminally ill, and that person begins to interact and talk to spirits. And what's really fascinating, what we've noticed, we meaning near-death experience researchers, is that people that are in close physical proximity, be they family members, dear friends, but even healthcare workers, hospice workers, also start picking up on this. So I saw that all these different phenomena They're not separate. And traditionally, they've been treated like a salad bar. Mediumships over here,
Right.
visitations over here,
Right.
near-death experiences over there, that they all have a common denominator, and that's energy transfer and frequency alignment. And so that's why I wrote The Afterlife Frequency, is to explain to people the scientific proof of spiritual contact and how that awareness will change your life, and explain all this on the basis of quantum physics. But I have to give a spoiler alert. When people hear quantum physics, they start thinking, oh, dear God.
Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. Trust me, I suffered through enough boring books and boring legal opinions in my career in law school and as an attorney. I promise I will not do that to you with this book. I explain the quantum physics in a way that anybody can understand it, and I illustrate all the concepts that I introduce with stories. Some are funny, some are very emotional, some are very heavy, but they're stories that everybody can relate to.
Well, Mark, I mean, that's a great reason to write this book. And I mean, I can tell people that Mark, when he puts his mind into something, it's, he wants to get the facts. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't do these days.
No.
Yeah. They just want to, hear it and believe it, but they don't necessarily want to go do their own research. And that's one thing I like about you. But we talk about energy transfer and also soul. And I think a lot of people get really confused because
Sure.
What is the difference between energy and a soul? Because there's energy in a light socket, but that's not a soul, or is it? Because
Or is it?
I was going to say, or is it? Because that's something that kind of can be confusing to a lot of people. Well, like, well, if it's just energy, then we just go into a wall or go into it. I mean, where do we go? What do we do? But we've been taught, because of religion, it's the mansions on the hill and the golden streets, and it's heaven and God on a throne. And so I think a lot of people are like, where do we go? What do we do? And what is energy and what is a soul?
Well, let's start with basic understanding of quantum physics. We all know from school that everything is made of molecules, which are made of atoms,
Right.
which in turn are composed of electrons, protons, and neutrons.
Right.
And then those subatomic particles are made of an even smaller particle, a quantum. And for our physics-oriented audience members, electrons are technically a quantum because they're 1/1800th the size of a proton. So everything, Tony, on the basic subatomic level is a particle of electromagnetic energy. And what's really fascinating about that is science has been traditionally split into two fields, physics and biology. Physics being the study of energy and non-living matter, and biology of living matter. But on the subatomic level, everything is electromagnetic energy. And we also know from the study of quantum physics that everything vibrates on a subatomic level. So, this computer mouse that I'm holding is vibrating on the subatomic level,
Right.
because it is made of the same electromagnetic energy that you are, that I am, that the electricity in the socket in the wall that you mentioned, the radio waves the show is being broadcast on, the light from the sun, the air that we breathe, the water in the ocean, everything is electromagnetic energy, and everything vibrates at a different frequency. So we know from faith, from all the various religions, that the soul, which is referred to either as a spirit or a soul,
Right.
and in science and psychology as consciousness. And every great spiritual teacher, Tony, holds that the soul pre-exists the body, comes into the body, moves on after the body dies. And the laws of physics teach us that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. The field of neuroscience, which studies the brain, has proven that the brain, our entire body has an electrical field, but the most complex electrical field is the electromagnetic field in the brain. So in the Afterlife Frequency, I introduce a new term, the electromagnetic soul. As Dr. Gary Schwartz calls it, the EMS. He loved
Right,
it. He wrote
right.
the forward to the book. He loved it. He goes, Mark, I love it. I'm using it. It's the EMS. And what an honor. I mean, I was just so honored. And so the electromagnetic soul is a 21st century term, Tony, to describe what we really are, which is pure consciousness, which is eternal electromagnetic energy. So to answer your question, when we physically die, this EMS, electromagnetic soul in our brain, think of it as like a drop of water that leaves our body and plunges into this eternal sea of frequency, the afterlife frequency. I also call that the collective consciousness. So we don't die. It's just that our energy now moves to a higher vibration, because here we are in these bodies, these meat suits,
Right.
and yeah, we're vibrating at a lower and slower vibration
Right.
because we have a denser molecular structure than the pure energy that is the EMS. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and that brings up another question: is so if when we die, our brain that holds all this information from this life, how do we take the conscience and the intelligence with that energy once we die?
Well, the intelligence and the conscience is that energy. And the way it's been described by, give me a little latitude here.
Of course.
Okay. Okay. Physicists from all over the world. See, traditionally there was people of faith, and then there were scientists, and you know, it was like, people of faith look at scientists as nothing but heretics, and people of science look at, you know, the faith people as, oh, they're wallowing in primitive superstitious nonsense.
Right.
But enter the 20th century in quantum physics, the walls begin to divide, to dissolve. And because we know about energy being neither created nor destroyed, only transferred.
Right.
And so now there's physicists at the Lebedev Institute in Moscow, at the Max Planck Institute in Germany, Oxford, the Pasteur Institute in France. I mean, the Japanese Physics Institute, all over the United States. Right. And one of my favorite quotes is by Professor Fritz Albert Popp of the German Biophysics Institute. I mean, can you think of anyone more serious than a German physicist?
Right.
And he said that, think of the brain like a computer hard drive, and your personality and consciousness are the programs on the hard drive. And when it crashes, these programs are not lost. They are merely transferred to a higher frequency. And it's like, what a beautiful analogy, because, you know, our computer did not create Windows 10.
Right.
It merely hosts the programs and the knowledge in the database. And so our brain is essentially a computer hard drive, and it's a formatting instrument. And so the EMS, the electromagnetic soul, is housed there. And that's why, like, when I communicate with spirits, people who maybe had Alzheimer's or severe mental impairments, or were very heavily brain damaged, when their spirit comes through, there's none of that. They are crystal clear with their intellect, with their memories, with their ability to transmit information.
I mean, then I hope I'm not getting too off topic with this. It's just very, I mean, this
we're going as out there as it gets. So go ahead, Tony.
No, I just I love this conversation because it's brought up questions I've never really thought about. And so my ADD brain's kicking in. So what would make us different from a, let's say, a robot that has energy in it and has intelligence in it? When and do you think robots or let's say like
going to take over and Skynet's going to get
Skynet's
us?
Because when do they get a
vista,
right? It's like when does that, since it's energy, why can't they have the intelligence and think for themselves and emotions?
That's a very good point. From my understanding of AI, artificial intelligence, at this point, computers are just acting on the basis of algorithmic responses.
Right.
So, when we talk to Siri or Alexa or Google, and it scares me sometimes because I'll be watching TV and I got my phone, sitting there on the coffee table, and I'll be talking to somebody else, and it goes, "Oh, you are asking about this," and I didn't ask it. It's listening.
I've had it too.
It's listening. At this point, what's happening is, let's say you ask a computer a question, its algorithmic responses will pick up key concepts in your question, and then basically search a database to give you a canned response. So at this point, it's an action reaction as opposed to actually formulating ideas, having empathy, a personality. Now, that being said, perhaps we as the carbon-based life forms, maybe our purpose in the universe is to give birth to the silicon-based life forms, and perhaps at some point artificial intelligence will cease to be artificial and take on a self-awareness. Now, I mean, this is a popular theme in science fiction, and I was joking around about Skynet because according to those movies, that's what happens.
Right.
And I hope that it doesn't. I
hope not either.
But all too often, the science fiction of yesterday is the science fact of today.
Or today, yeah. I remember when, back in the 70s going to Disneyland and the, Future Land or whatever it was. And we're like, oh my gosh. And like we've pretty much surpassed many of what that prediction was. So it is kind of like, oh God, that's kind of scary.
Well, yeah. Nikola Tesla said back in the 1920s, he was interviewed, and he said that with advances in television and telephony, because at that time television was a rudimentary thing, we're talking the 1920s,
right?
And telephones were still a fairly new invention. Only wealthy people had them. But what he said was eventually the entire world will be a universal brain, and we'll be able to not only talk to each other, but even see each other on a device small enough to fit in a man's breast pocket.
Oh, wow.
So decades before cell phones were technologically possible, the intellect of Nikola Tesla saw it. And it's funny because a few years ago, I was at a function and I met George Takei, who played Mr. Sulu.
Yeah.
And he was talking and he said, in Star Trek, we had those communicators that you flip open. And he says, and now that's one of the most irritating things in the 21st century are cell phones.
Right. Well, when they first came out, it was like everybody wanted one. But now people are like, oh, God, it's destroying our society.
It is. I saw a really funny post on Facebook. It shows all these people sitting on park benches, and they're in a park, and everyone's fixated on their cell phone, and in the background Bigfoot's walking by. And the caption read, "This is why there have been no recent photos of Bigfoot."
Right. Too many people taking selfies up in the mountains.
Well, nobody's paying attention.
Right,
everybody's plugged into the silicon device that's going to take over one of these days.
We won't even notice. Well, I want to get back to your book because no, I mean I could talk to you all day. But about everything. But the afterlife example. Like my mother passed away 3 years ago, and before she passed away, she talked about seeing her mother.
Yes.
And she never met her mother. Like she never met her mother, but her mother, her real mother, came to see her, and my mom was in a veterans retirement home. And so, and then she also said, there's people that keep walking into my room, but I don't know. I mean, she goes, when I turn around, nobody's there. What is that
vision?
What is that? Because I've heard people going, oh, when you're close to death or when you go to the light, it's just chemicals kicking in, and and it's just you're for like keeping your mind from the tragedy of it or whatever. What is that energy? Because again, if it's energy coming to greet you,
yes.
Could you explain that a little bit better than I tried to even ask the question?
Actually, in fact, I go very, very deeply into this very question in the afterlife frequency. I got a story in there that it would take too long
Right.
to explain,
Okay.
but it's just absolutely fascinating. But what you're describing is been termed a DBV, a deathbed vision. And what happens is, as people are getting ready to transition, as your mother was, the EMS in her body, her electromagnetic soul, is preparing to leave. And so she is literally got a foot in two different dimensions, our dimension and
Right.
that of the other side. Spirits know this, and they come in to make contact with her and basically to greet her as she steps over. So people say, oh, well, this is a grief induced hallucination. This is a side
Right.
effect of the dying brain. But a deathbed vision can become a shared death experience. And a shared death experience means that bystanders, family members, close friends, healthcare and hospice workers who are in close proximity, they start to say, wait a second, who was that? What was that? They start seeing the spirits. And this phenomenon is reported worldwide and for centuries. I mean, there's been paintings about this where, people are there with a dying loved one, and then they see angels and spirits and of that person. So what's happening is the EMS of the transitioning person, its energy is expanding, and people in close proximity, their EMSs, their electromagnetic souls, start getting caught up in this frequency overlap. So then they begin to experience what the dying person is.
Mm-hmm.
So the deathbed vision of the transitioning person then becomes a shared death experience, because people who are not in imminent danger or of dying
Right.
begin to see and experience what the person transitioning does.
Oh, wow.
And this is extremely important, because this takes a deathbed vision out of the realm of the subjective and brings it into the objective, because more than one person not only experiences it, but then can verify it.
Do they have to be in the same room, or because I've heard about people going, I had a dream, or my grandmother came to visit the night she died. I mean, so
well, that's when the person dies,
right,
and then within seconds of their death, a close loved one will see them.
Right.
It's like when I was a little boy, I was about 4 years old, and maybe a little bit older than that, maybe almost 5. And one Sunday morning, my mother sat up in bed and she goes, oh my God. And my father woke up and he said, well, what's going on? She said to my dad, she goes, I just saw my father standing in the doorway. And her father had been in New Jersey and he was dying of cancer. And it was 7 o'clock in the morning. And she said that he was standing in the doorway and he looked young and handsome. He had rosy cheeks, and he used to wear this fedora hat. And he was from Italy. So, he always liked dressing in nice suits, and there he was in a fedora hat. And he saw her in the doorway, and she said she received a message from him. He said, Jeannie, there is something beyond this life, and it's wonderful. And then he tipped his hat and vanished. And so she was devastated. And she called her mother, her sister, no answer. And then eventually her brother, my Uncle Joey, called, and he was crying. He goes, Daddy died. She goes, when? He goes, 7 a.m. this morning.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, my grandfather, whom I have very shadowy memories of, because he was, I was 4 when he died. He had 10 grandchildren.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
And one of them happens to look exactly like him.
Oh my gosh, really?
And that would be me. So 20 years after that, I'm in law school. And I was we just wrapped up, because it was in a December day when that happened. And I was supposed to drive back to Florida. I was going to law school in Georgia. And I thought, oh, screw it, I want to go see my parents. So I just finished my exam and I jumped in. I had this clunker van,
Right.
and I'm heading down I-75. I'm all excited. I'm going to surprise my parents. And that Halloween, I'd been Indiana Jones, and I had my fedora. Hold on, hold on.
I want to see. Yeah, I want to see it. Oh my
Which
gosh,
I still do.
that's hilarious. Nice. I feel like you're getting ready to break out a song like a crooner or something.
Yeah, well, I know. Well, I've always had this hat. So anyway, I get to Florida, drive up in the driveway. I open the front door. I walk in. My dad's sitting there in front of the TV, and my mom looks up and screams and gets up and runs out of the room. And I'm like, "Hi." I go, "What's with mom?" And my dad goes, "You know how your mother is." so I bring my suitcase in. I'm a little bit, and a few minutes later, my mother comes to my bedroom, and I'll never forget seeing the tears in her eyes, Tony. And she said, "Mark, when you walked in the door wearing that hat, I thought it was my father.
Oh my gosh. So
He died 20 years ago today." Okay. Way past coincidence.
Yeah, that you can't deny that. I mean, you can't deny that. And do you ever have any visions of your grandpa? I mean, does he ever come to you in spirit or?
Not a lot. I have certainly my parents come to me quite a bit,
Right.
and some friends. And interestingly enough, my father's sister Marjorie, whom I never met, but there's a reason that she comes to me. When she's around, it's like danger, danger, Will Robinson. She's always given me the heads up.
Right.
And Marjorie had, because see, my mom's side of the family, there's mediums running in the, I mean, the Italians, they looked at it as a gift from God, and they really, cherished it. My dad's family, very prominent conservative Christians from Pennsylvania. And his sister Marjorie, he had three sisters, but Margie was the psychic one, as was his mother Isabel and his maternal grandmother Grace. And Margie unfortunately married this extremely religious guy who thought she was doing the work of the devil. And he was a machinist who worked at a steel plant in Pennsylvania. So one morning he's getting ready to go to work, and she begs him not to go. She goes, "Something horrible is going to happen. I just know it. I just know it." And they got into a big argument. She threw a fit. She wouldn't let him go. So he stayed home, and he was like, "You and that voodoo stuff." Well, that day, a crane was lifting thousands of pounds of steel beams, and the cable broke, and the beams crushed the machine shop he worked in and killed everybody in it. Now, one would think he might be grateful. Instead, he was so afraid, he found a psychiatrist to diagnose her as schizophrenic. And she was forcibly removed from her home and subjected to electroshock therapy for 6 months in a mental institution. They damaged her brain so much that she never spoke of seeing spirits again.
Really?
Oh, it was horrible. And my mother was livid. She couldn't stand him. She said, "I'll never let him in my house." And this happened like 20 years before I was born. And that's why when I started seeing spirits around 3.5, and when I was getting ready to start school at 5, my dad was like, "Mark, you don't talk about this to anyone except your mother and I." And I remember he goes, "Because people who see things others don't get taken away." All right, well, I'm terrified. I'm like, I'm getting ready to go to school, and it was Catholic school, which is scary enough as it is, But and I didn't understand why he was so concerned until I got older, and I saw that he wasn't trying to scare me; he was trying to protect me.
Well, yeah, and I think, and we'll probably get into that too, because I have to say I don't remember having dreams or anything about, or my mother coming to visit me, but my spouse did say a couple days after my mother died, I don't remember this, that I was talking to my mother in my sleep. I don't remember it at all.
What's with you? Is there a significance between you and your mom, or with you in the month of February?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I was married in February, and my parents were married in February.
Bingo, mom.
Yeah.
Mom, I keep getting tell Tony February, tell Tony February.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That was. I think we're 3-4 days after their anniversary is our wedding.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
It's, and I think that's because a lot of people are like, oh, I'd have dreams all the time. Do you feel that energy from the spirit of our loved ones when they come to visit? What is that purpose? And why do they come? If we are just a ball of energy, why do they come as a vision of who they were in this life?
So we can identify them, because if they just come in as an orb, it'll be like, and you are. And what I've noticed is that when a spirit initially makes contact, with me, or with most recipients, generally you're going to see them the
As
way
they
they
were.
appeared prior to passing.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's say your mom showed up to visit you looking 17 years old.
I'd be like, who are you?
Yeah, who are you? And but because those are identifiers,
Right.
and they'll come through. And one of the first things I pick up on is how people passed. It's not because they're suffering from that. Those are simply identifying characteristics. And it was one of the fascinating things I've noticed, and I once again I write about this in Afterlife Frequency, is that many times, let's say somebody comes through that was elderly and maybe very sick,
Right.
and all of a sudden they morph into this young version of themselves. And I remember one of the first times I made contact with my mother, it was in a dream, and I walked in to this room, everything in it was white. And she was seated in the corner, and she was wearing this cool dress. It was like blue and black. It looked like an impressionist painting, and she looked great. And I sat down next to her, and I go, "Mom, you look like you're 30 years old. You look great. Why do you do that?" And she said, "Because I can." And I'm laughing because it's like, well, duh. I mean, like if we could all like morph into 22 years old, washboard abs, perfect physique, chiseled, everything.
Right.
But then I realized it was much bigger than that. And it was transmitted to me that energy doesn't get old, sick, tired, or die. So they'll come through looking the way they did so we can identify them. And then they oftentimes will morph into how they look great. Now, this is correlated with near-death experiences, because when people a near-death experience is where somebody dies, but they come back to life, and they give an account of what happened to them,
Right.
and usually traveling through a tunnel into a bright white light, and they'll encounter spirits of loved ones who've passed. And oftentimes they will say that everybody looked like they were in their 20s or 30s, and that's once again underscoring that spirits are pure energy.
So do you think that since a lot of times they come to us as when they're younger, and energy really doesn't age, so our human bodies, are they really supposed to age, or or is it just the environment that we've put ourselves in?
That's an interesting question. When you read about scientists that are studying why do we age, and it appears to be encoded in our cells. And so there's scientists looking into, well, what happens if we can interrupt that process? And I don't know how close scientists are to doing that, but they understand these things a lot more. There's a lot of people that say, look, I'd want to live forever. It's like, do you? Yeah. What if there's a nuclear war?
Right.
All right. Do you want to live through that?
No. Yeah, and I don't want to live through a planet that's, the planet's not dying. It's just the stuff that we need is dying.
Yeah, well, it was really fascinating seeing Captain Kirk, William Shatner's response to being on the Blue Horizon. For years, we grew up watching Captain Kirk, but to see him as a 90-year-old man and breaking down and crying and saying, it's so fragile. Earth is so fragile. Yep. He said, you see this beautiful blue and this atmosphere, and it's life, and then the death, the void. And I've been very, very privileged throughout my life to have met Neil Armstrong
That
and
would have
Buzz
been amazing.
Aldrin, the first two humans to walk on the moon.
Right.
I also met John Glenn,
Oh
the
my God.
first,
Wow.
and he was great. I talked to him, and I met Bill Nelson, who's now the head of NASA, and he was a politician that went up in the shuttle. And then I met, this was funny. I was out at breakfast one morning because I lived not too far from Kennedy Space Center. And I was
Right.
at this place, and this guy was standing there with, it looked like his wife and possibly his mom. And he had the coolest NASA jacket I have ever seen. I mean, it was awesome. And I'm checking it out, and I go, I love your jacket. I go, the shuttle landed yesterday. Did you see it? And he looks me right in the eye, and he goes, I landed it. And it was Captain Mike Foreman, and he's
Oh
an
my
astronaut.
God.
And he said, "Yeah, we landed yesterday, and I heard the blueberry muffins here were really great, so we came for breakfast." And but I remember when I met John Glenn, and I asked him, "What was it like?" And he said, "It is incredible when you're looking down and you see the blues and the greens and how alive our world is." And he goes, and then, Mark, it hit me. This is the only place we have to live. And I heard Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin say similar things to that. And so, we live in a very precious material world dimension. But the thing is, life is eternal, energy is eternal. But I still think that it's incredibly important for us to not light our house on fire.
Right. Right. I was just thinking about that the other day. I was like, if somebody came on your lawn and started dumping trash and set your house on fire and cut your tires, what would you do?
Yeah. I grew up, I've lived by the ocean most of my life,
Right.
and humanity has treated the ocean as a garbage dump.
Right.
I mean, you think of all the
it's a
ships
lot of
that have
trash.
sunk, the garbage, the trash, the sewage, and it's getting to the point now where Mother Earth is not handling it very well.
I remember back in the day. You remember the commercial for the butter? It's not nice to fool with Mother Nature.
It's true,
and I keep hearing that in my head, going, "Oh, she's getting pissed."
Yeah, she is.
Well, if you guys are just tuning in, we have a lot more people in the chat room than we had when we started. So this is Mark Anthony. He has an amazing book that's been released. It's called The Afterlife Frequency. And the scientific proof of spiritual contact and how that awareness will change your life. And for the people, my favorite co-host, if you want to ask a question, please ask a question in the chat room. And we have a few questions already, so I'd love to ask a couple from them. We have, let's see, Scotty Pimpin says, after one life in this universe, then off to the next universe, can you explain the never-ending universe?
I've asked that question of spirits, because I was raised Catholic, and I was like, well, so when do we get to live in the Michelangelo painting?
Right.
Where, there's Jesus cruising around. And I love the way, Western artists depict Jesus as this blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Ocean Pacific surfer dude,
Right.
And, the angels are all these, they look like elves out of Lord of the Rings and all this, and God is the stately, white bearded gentleman.
Right.
We have to realize that these are human depictions of trying to interface with eternity. And in several encounters with spirits, I've asked about, well, what happens? I mean, we go through a series of incarnations, because I believe in reincarnation. Everyone like myself and believes in mediums and NDEers believe in reincarnation. And certainly billions of people on this planet do. And there's so much evidence in support of it. do we eventually not come back here and go to heaven?
Right.
And the way it was described to me, first off, they said, why do you worry of such things? You should focus on where you are now and learn the lessons and experience the things that you're supposed to. And I'm like, yeah. I always hear that, but come on, tell me something, And so they said that it is the eternal journey of energy. When you are done with this dimension, you will simply transfer to another one, to another planet, to another dimension, and begin a new cycle. Like, well, how long does that go on? And they said, well, that's what it is. It's the eternal journey of energy. And I'm like, oh my God, and I said, but do we ever get to go to heaven to be with God? And I got the distinct impression they were laughing at me, not because we don't, but because of my mindset that, I keep thinking I'm going to end up in the Michelangelo Sistine Chapel painting, and that's not what it is. But they also have explained to me that it's just an amazing, fantastic journey, and energy is eternal, and we are constantly shifting and evolving and transferring to other worlds. So that is how it's been presented to me. And, I don't pretend to have all the answers. I may have some insights into things like this, but that is what has been presented to me on many occasions from spirits.
I mean, that's a great answer, and I hope that, Scotty, that answers that. But I'm curious on, nothing against, listen, like you grew up Catholic, I grew up in the Bible Belt. I'm trying to the faith base, Christianity, Catholic, whatever religion you're in, versus the spiritual side or the energetic side of death.
Sure. Well, religions are created by human beings. God exists in spite of religion, not because of religion. This bends a lot of people out of shape.
That's what I was going to say. It's like,
the Bible's infallible. So, well, which version? Okay, I mean, by the 6th century A.D., there had been 5 ecumenical councils, and at each one a different version of the Bible. And then Christianity split from Western Christianity to Eastern Orthodox, and then Western Christianity started fragmenting, and Catholicism versus Protestantism, and on and on and on and on. And, Islam, you have Sunnis and Shiites, and as far as they're concerned, the Quran is the word of God. And people are so concerned about their human created dogmas being the final word on this.
Right.
But I have no problem with religion if people would actually practice the religion. Gandhi had a really great point. He said that, what religion is God? Is God a Muslim? Is God a Presbyterian? Is God a Hindu? I mean, we could go on and on.
Depends which church, temple, or what you ask.
Exactly. And the other problem is that messages from spirits, and we're seeing this a lot. And in the Afterlife frequency, I introduced the RAFT technique, a 4-step technique to teach people how to recognize, accept, feel, and trust messages from spirits.
Yes. Explain that for me, please.
Yeah, well, I was trying to explain how do people who are not mediums, because not everyone's a psychic and a medium, and I'm not trying to turn you into one in this book, but everybody is capable of having a psychic or mediumistic experience because of our physiology. We have 2 receptor areas, 2 endocrine glands, the pineal gland in the region of the solar plexus where we receive information. And Tony, I just couldn't figure out how to explain it. I hit that dreaded writer's block. So I decided to go for a walk on the beach. And so I'm heading down my driveway and I get these cold chills and tingles. So I know that, okay, this is electromagnetic activity. Spirits are afoot. and I'm compelled to make an about face and instead head down this bike path in the opposite direction of the beach. It's around 11 in the morning. So I'm walking down the bike path and I see these 2 objects shining in the sun. I go to pick them up and it's a penny and a nickel. And I hear my mother's voice. If they're not heads up, it's bad luck. And I'm
Right.
laughing, Tony, because yeah, so that's one of those Italian superstitions.
Right,
We have a
right.
superstition for all occasions. And then I hear my dad's voice. It's money, grab it. So
That's
I'm
my
laughing, and
that's my
yeah, it's
version.
money. So I'm holding this nickel and this penny. I go, oh, 6 cents. And then all of a sudden I go,
6 cents.
6 cents. And then the cold chills and tingles intensified. And in my mind's eye, I saw my father standing in the ocean holding this blue canvas raft that he used to have. And all right, so dad was a Navy SEAL. He was a scuba diver, a swimming instructor. He taught all these kids how to swim, including myself. And then it dawned on me. I knew what my parents were trying to tell me. Raft. Teach people how to recognize signs from spirits.
Amen to
Accept those signs as real. Feel it without fear and overthinking it, and then trust the message. So I run back to my office, and the words just flew out of me. I got like 10 paragraphs, boom, 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 boom. And that was the raft technique. And then I realized it was more than just an experience like I had. It could be applied to making sense of a dream where a loved one talks to you, or you smell a familiar scent like a cologne and there's no sign, there's no source for it, or you're compelled to turn on the radio and there's that song. But what about if you have a near-death experience? It helps you understand that. A deathbed vision, Tony, like your mother had, you can start to use the raft technique there. And so I saw that they gave me this broad-based application and how to teach people to get the maximum benefit out of sensing signs from spirits. And where people go wrong is in the third step. Recognize, okay, I'm accepting it, feeling it without overthinking it. This is where people begin to doubt themselves. They overthink it. They cross-examine it. Oh, it's a grief-induced hallucination. Oh, it's a side effect of a dying brain. It's my imagination. And then it fizzles out. And so I give some exercises and teach people how to work through that. And I've had a number of people already, since the book's been out, been giving me very positive feedback about how the raft technique has been working for them. But there's something I do want to add, Tony.
Okay.
The T part, the trust. In this crazy day and age, we're getting all these nutcases going around going, I'm getting messages to start an insurrection, to get people to put on bomb vests, to shoot and kill and all that. None of those type of messages are coming from the divine. No message like that is coming from a spirit. Those messages are generated by that person's ego, a device of the brain, not of the spirit. Ego, edging God out. Because people are looking for a moral justification to commit acts of anger, bigotry, hatred, and violence. Those are not spiritual.
Right.
Messages from spirits are not to control us. They're not designed to manipulate us. And they're about peace, love, healing, resolution, and compassion. And that's the difference. When you receive a message from a spirit, healing, love, resolution, compassion, they may give you the heads up on avoiding a potentially dangerous person, place, or thing. But that's all part of healing and compassion. So that's the difference. And I want to, because it's like, I don't want to get political, but, the guy, the so-called shaman of the insurrection, looks like he's going to get 51 months in prison. And it's like, boo-hoo. But the thing is, he was going around going, I'm a shaman. I'm getting these. He's not a shaman. He's an egoistic narcissist. Yeah, who is inciting acts of violence. And I try to avoid politics like the plague, but since that's in the news right now, I think that's a pretty darn good example of what I'm talking about.
No, I agree. I've never had a message of saying,
go take axe and kill.
Physically hurt somebody, go out and steal from somebody. I've never, if I've ever done something, it was because I was angry, because my feelings were hurt, my ego was pride or whatever it was. It was not a message that told me to do anything.
Exactly. Like that. And you hit the nail on the head, as usual. Whenever you do something hurtful, it's because you're acting from your ego.
Right.
Whenever you've hurt someone else's feelings or been unkind, you're thinking me, 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 me. You weren't acting out of love for that other person.
Yeah. just because of time, I want to move on just a little bit, and I want to ask one more question, but for the chat room. But one thing that you talk about in the book is providing hope for recovering from grief, PTSD, survivor's guilt, suicide, homicide, all that stuff. I have to say, and I'm not trying to do this for myself, I'm talking about for a lot of people. I'm sure, when your parent died, it does change you.
Oh, God, yes.
Even if you've had a bad relationship with a parent or a sibling, but for me, I was close to my mother. I haven't felt the same since my mother passed away. I kind of feel like a different person. I know that's not what she wants. And I'm not saying that I'm not happy. I'm not saying I don't, go out and live my life, but I feel differently. Can an energy between two people, such as a parent, best friend, sibling, when that person is physically gone, well, the energy's still there. Why do I feel so disconnected from her? And why am I not moving on and happy that she is in a better place?
Well, that's grief. It's part of being human. And
Right.
what happens is, we have to realize that our relationship goes from one of a physical nature to one of a spiritual nature. And Tony, you're growing.
Right.
We grow in response to adversity.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody dies, it changes us. So you're
does.
not the same person that you were before, but you're growing, you're changing. You become even deeper, more compassionate, more philosophical, more introspective. These are the positive byproducts of grief.
Right.
Now, you could make another choice. You could start to become angry, act on rage, start drinking and using drugs, become abusive, engage in impulsive and acting out behaviors. And many people do that. That's why I always, say that men in particular, we have a hard time expressing our feelings. And I work a lot with men, to teach them it's okay to cry. My dad, the Navy SEAL, taught me a real man is never afraid to cry for someone he loves who died, and he's never afraid to say, I love you. Now, my dad was the exception, not the rule. And I'm very thankful for that. So grief is a lifetime journey. It'd be nice to be, have the Harry Potter magic wand and wave it and go, okay, I absolve you of grief.
Right.
But that doesn't exist.
Right.
So each day is a step in the journey through grief, and we grow in response to adversity. So you are growing, and perhaps through your grief, when you encounter others who are suffering with theirs, you can counsel or at least be a sympathetic ear, which means a lot.
And I have to say, I never thought I would be able to survive my mother's death, but I did. But like you said, there are things. When my mother told me that she was ready to go, all of a sudden it came out of my mouth. I said, Mother, that is your choice, and that is between you and God. And I would think, oh my God, no, Mother, don't do it, don't go. And I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, I can't believe I'm actually saying that I'm okay with you going, because I knew the pain she was in, and I didn't want her to be in pain anymore.
But you were acting out of love, Tony.
Right.
If you were selfish, don't do this to me, hang on.
Right.
You're a good son. And you were her special child.
Oh, for sure.
She said that I could always talk to Tony. I could just look at him. He understood.
Yeah.
And she always knew that when she passed, you would take it hardest of all. But she also said the thing about Tony, she said, whenever you got pushed down, you never laid there and cried. You sprang back up. And she said, and you still do.
Right. Yeah. No, it's.
Hey, are you getting like new end tables or some like new furniture or something? She's talking about you in end tables or furniture or some type of table.
I'm always buying something, but yeah, probably. I mean, I do want to get a new an end table in the bedroom.
There you go. Now, let me explain why that's so important. When a spirit gives us a message of an explanatory advisory nature, and she has told you about your resilience and no matter what you get up. Okay, so that's the advice and explanation. And then when a spirit gives me an objectively verifiable fact, end table, you want to get a new end table. That verifiable fact event table is how your mom is letting you and I know that we have properly received and interpreted the message.
Right.
Okay. And you hear something now and again like this. She's talking about like this. It's like not for very long, but you hear this high-pitched sound. Does that make any sense?
I mean, I do. You know where sometimes your ear, it's almost, what do they call that?
Tinnitus.
Tinnitus. It's almost like out of nowhere. I'm like, oh my God, am I getting tinnitus? Because it'll do the.
That's your mom.
Okay, and then it'll
you're
go away.
Frequency. That's why I'm getting.
Yeah.
It's not, doesn't stay very long with you. So what's happening is she's letting you know this through me, that you pick up on frequency, and that so don't despair. She does come to you. You're going to notice it more and more.
Well,
is Will doing something with a bunch of light bulbs? Is he doing things with lighting or light bulbs? She's talking about him and all these light bulbs.
Not that. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe he's putting up Christmas lights or something.
Maybe.
She's talking about all those light bulbs. Okay, so you're gonna have to get back with me on that.
I will.
One, she talks about him with. I'm seeing all these light bulbs.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I'll have to get back with you on that one. That one I don't know.
Well. What's interesting is a lot of times, like I was doing a reading the other night, and for this gentleman, and his father came through and kept saying two snakes, and I'm thinking the medical symbol, with the two snakes and all that.
Right.
And he said, no, I don't think that's it. He goes, I think it's Native American. This was a phone reading, so I couldn't see him. And I go, why do you say that? He goes, well, I'm Native American. I go, okay. Next day, he contacts me, and he sent me this page out of a book. He took a picture of it. He's of the Sioux Nation, and literally Sioux means two snakes.
Oh, now, wow.
I didn't know that. I didn't know
Sioux. That either. I didn't know.
And it was the particular branch of the Sioux Nation that he was part of. And let me tell you that he said that just made my week. He goes, I didn't know that either, and I'm Sioux.
Right. Wow. That's I didn't even know that. I learned something.
So just because you don't understand something right away, and that's another chapter in the book that I call the unfolding, because the reading's like a flower, blooms, blossoms, unfolds. It can take hours, days, weeks, even longer. I know we're coming up on the top of the hour, so Tony, back to you.
All right. Well, you know what? We're going to have you come back, because we have more to talk about, and because you always bring, like you said, the wisdom that we need, and being able to relay it in a way that we can understand it. And so I'll ask this last question, and then we'll get out of here. But when we contact, or when the spirits contact us, you say it's a powerful instrument of healing and love.
Yes.
How does that contact? Because most of us, if we get a vision or a message or something, we take it as just a message, but we don't really heal from it. But how do we heal from that message?
Well, once again, I go into that in the book, because it may initially appear as just a message, but as you let the message unfold, you'll see that there's many different levels to it. Okay. And there's so many facets. God, it would take me 3 books, which I've written to answer that question. But if, for example, Tony, earlier when your mother brought up February, it says there is significance, and the message, you said, well, yeah, I was married in February and my parents were married in February. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now let's think about that. Your parents had a very long and happy marriage, correct?
Oh yeah. 58 years.
Now, what do you think she's telling you about your marriage?
Going to hopefully have a long and happy
marriage. But you see, at first blush, it was just, a piece of evidence that I was married in February and so was mom and dad. But it's much more than that. So when you begin to think on it, you'll start to see that there are several levels to those messages. Right. So, that's but great. Anyway, that would take a lot more time than we have in 2 minutes.
Well, we'll have to have you back, as always, because we won't let it be as long as this last time. So where do people find the book? Where can people, I know you have your own show, and please promote that, and so people can get more messages through your show and then read the book.
Sure. Just like on the screen, my website is afterlifefrequency.com. I invite everyone to sign up for the newsletter, and every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, I'm co-host of The Psychic and the Doc with Dr. Pat Basili, the
Nice.
host. She's the host of the Dr. Pat Show, but we teamed up to do a show on her network, the Transformation Network, and we take calls from listeners, and it's a really great positive show. We have some amazing guests, so you can find out about all of that and booking a reading with me and ordering my book. It'll take you to the hyperlink on Amazon at afterlifefrequency.com.
Awesome. And thank you, Mark, so much. And always a pleasure. And, I hold you dear to my heart because, like I said, I think we're on the same frequency in this pathway that we're on. And but next week, guys, it's a big Friday. And, Mark, you may have to come back and help me. We have at 9 a.m. Pacific time, we have Eric Van Danigan going to be on the show talking about his brand new book. And then at 3 o'clock, our regular time, Robert Schock is going to be on the show talking all about Egypt. So you guys can't miss that. So you're going to have to mark your calendars and make sure you're tuning in. So, but as always, thank you. Please subscribe, like this show, share this show, and please support Mark at afterlifefrequency.com. If you need a reading, I know people are asking, hey, can you talk to my parents? Maybe, book him for a reading. I'm sure Mark would be glad to help out. But until next time, thank you guys for tuning in. And I'm always here on Fridays. And Mondays, you have Robert Hensley with Minuteman Report. And then on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock, you have Bonnie Burkert doing Truth Be Told Transformation. So information all week long. All right. Until next time, we'll see you then. Bye. This has been another episode of Truth Be Told. Thank you so much for watching. Recorded live at UBN Go Studios in Burbank, California. Join us on social media. Facebook, Truth Be Told Radio. Instagram, Truth Be Told Paranormal. Go to Truth Be Told Worldwide for more information on upcoming shows.